Yeah, it started. We can.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, guys. So, as a part of Bhaktavya, which is the second edition of not just the leadership talks, but the second season of it, this is basically a series of ongoing webinars wherein we get industry stalwarts and domain experts to basically come share their insights and ideas. And this time, the Finance and Economics Club from IIM Visakhapatnam is delighted to host Mr. Amit Kumar Agarwal. So, although you've already read about Sir, but I'll give you a brief about him. So Mr. Agarwal is an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad, and he's also the CEO and founder of NoBroker.com. And this is not just India's, but also the world's largest C2C real estate platform. And it basically strives to remove any sort of middlemen or brokers in the real estate transaction process. In addition to this, he's also worked extensively for over a decade as a management consultant, and this was mainly at a tenure with PwC. He's also held a leadership position at ANZ Bank. Over to you, sir. And guys, one more thing before we start, this will be an interactive session, so please feel free to type in your questions in the chat, or as if sir permits, you can directly ask him. Okay.
Sure. Thank you so much, guys. Uh, so I know that there are better things to do on a Sunday afternoon. What I intend not to do in this session is I don't want it to be a 1 hour monologue about entrepreneurship, startup, some leadership skill, etc. I don't want to do that. I think what I will basically do is in a story format, I'll just tell you in quick 5-10 minutes as to what has been my journey. I am also an IIM alumni, so perhaps I can relate a bit better with you guys. And then there are lots of questions that basically IIM students have, people who belong to your age category, and in terms of the similar pressures which come along. What I'm more interested is in cover my journey in quick 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the story format, and then open up with your questions. And the more the questions are practical, the more they are personal, the better it is for me, because then personal for you, personal for me, so that I can add more value to you. So anything which relates to how to raise funding, which type of co-founder to choose, which type of job should you aim for after passing from IIM, when should you start your startup, anything which really matters to you, please feel free to ask. If I'm able to add a little bit of value to you guys, then I think it is worth Sunday afternoon. Otherwise, there are better things to do. So let me start by quickly telling as to what my journey was, and then it's over to you. You can ask questions directly by unmuting you, or you can put it on chat, and I'm happy to answer it. I am basically an engineer from IIT Kanpur and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. And after my MBA, I basically, just like everybody else, finance and consulting firms were paying the most. So of course they were coveted, and so I joined PwC Management Consulting, and somehow I loved that job. So although the reason for joining the management consulting was more of a glamour, but I really loved the challenge, the adversity which comes at the client's place once you land there as a consultant. And I worked there for almost 10 years. Then I joined ANZ Bank, which is Australia New Zealand Bank in Bombay, as a head of strategy. It was a very comfortable job. So it was paying really well and a very comfortable job. And I spent 2 years there, and I realized that if I continue doing this job, then I will only try to get more salary, jump after a couple of years to another foreign bank, and so on and so forth. And that's it. So basically, once you have this golden lock, then it is very difficult to get rid of it. So I thought that it is time to basically take some risk and leave that job. So I left it, and along with two of my friends and co-founders, one of them is my IIM batchmate. We started NoBroker.com. And by starting, we basically meant that we three of us worked from our respective homes. That's it. So no office, nothing. Of course, we wanted to save money. And we started NoBroker.com. We did not register the company also. We just bought a platform, and my tech co-founder did a coding, and we launched the platform. And our concept was that why should, as an owner, tenant, buyer, seller, I should pay such a high amount of brokerage. to a half-educated person who just has some couple of phone numbers, and he's just trying to make quick bucks, and he's really not interested in my well-being. So he will want to push his worst inventory to me, and he just wants to take as quickly his cut. And in this age of technology, when I can send a friend request to any celebrity in the world, anybody in the world, they may or may not accept, then why is it that I should be paying such a huge amount of brokerage to this person when technology is there? So that was the concept, and we started nobroker.com. At that point of time, and even now, there were very strong, very well-funded players, platforms. At that point of time, many of them don't exist now or have become smaller, but at that point of time, they were even stronger players. And so it was a lot of competition. And the concept of non-brokerage was not tested before anywhere else in the world. So when we went and met investors, investors said that, so where is the Amazon or Uber equivalent in of no broker in US or in China? And the answer was nowhere. So there is no other. So this is called a C2C platform, customer to customer. Both the sides there are customers. B2C platform is the one where the property is posted by a broker, and then a tenant is basically consuming it. So we felt that on all the sexy looking new age platforms have come up, but finally there's a broker and he's charging me money. So we were asked whether there is any Amazon equivalent or a Uber equivalent of no broker, and there is none. So we couldn't say why there is no such player anywhere else in the world. We are doing something which is unique. But as an Indian, I know that I don't like to deal with brokers, and at least I don't like to pay so much money to them. I would rather do it for free or for a couple of thousand rupees. So it took a lot of time for us to convince customers, convince investors, because they wanted something which was much more safe. So we basically bootstrapped for a year, which was a difficult time in the sense of financially, because once you are into a couple of years of job, then you start taking home loan, then you increase your expenses, and hence once you stop working, then of course the salary stops, but you also need to put money into the business. So the cash drains very fast. And my wife Priyanka, she's my batchmate from IIT Kanpur. She wanted, we were expecting our kid, and she wanted to take a break from job. So it was a worst time to basically start something of my own, but she couldn't take that off because we needed funds. And after 1 year, the good thing was that customers at least accepted us. They wanted to try no broker. They want to save some money. And finally, one of the investors, TAC Partners, which is now known as Elevation Partners, they gave us 18 crores, and which was some 6 years back. Then we started our journey. In the next couple of years, Indian investors were very, 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 very cautious, because some of the real estate startups basically folded up and spent money like crazy. And generally, the experience about real estate investing was down in terms of investors' mind. So we went around. We arranged some funds from South Korea, from Singapore, from Japan, whichever small, big investor we could get to survive. Over the next few years, we just kept on being frugal and kept on doing what is good for customers, slowly increasing. And then we basically got Tiger Global and General Atlantic as investors. So now we are pretty big. In terms of customers, we add 4 lakh new customers per month. We have cumulative 1.4 crore customers now. We have raised more than 1,000 crore of funding, and we have around 2,000 employees, mostly based out of Bangalore. So now in terms of size, we are pretty big. We are approximately 8 to 10% of India's market share in the top cities where we operate in. So now I think we are at a decent scale. Yeah, there's a huge way to grow and go. But over the years, we have become bigger in size. Another thing which we did was we started with core real estate, but then we realized that there are many other businesses which we can do, because a customer who is coming looking for a flat or selling a flat needs home loan, needs packers and movers. So now we offer painting and cleaning, packers and movers, furniture, rent payment through credit card, financial services in terms of home loan and insurance. We offer home interior. So now we are in multiple services. So this is a very short, crisp journey of ours. And what I'm more interested in is if there's anything that I can help you answer, anything which you want to know about our journey, which can help you, any doubt that you have about startups in general, any query that you have, I'd be really happy to answer.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So basically, if people have questions, they can raise their hands or they can directly write in the chat box and we'll basically read out for them. Or if they want to directly ask a question, feel free to do so. I think there's a question by Asha. She's raised her hand. Asha, you want to ask something? You need to speak a little louder. Maybe it's from my end, but so are you able to hear her?
No, I'm not able to hear.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, sir, how does your revenue model work? Because you entered into additional services later on. Initially, how your revenue model works for you?
Yeah, so you can basically go on the site and check it also. What we basically do is multiple, of course, home services we charge for these services. But for the core real estate, we have a premium model, which basically means that as a tenant, you can come and you can contact 9 owners free of cost, no charge at all. As an owner, you can come and post property free of cost. But for all the premium services, for example, for premium filters of searching property, we charge. If you have, for the first year, it is free. For the next year, when you come to the Novabudh platform, then you have to pay a nominal fee, which is a couple of $1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 rupees. And for the owners who want to post their property and want their property to be at the top in terms of the listing and want their phone number to be hidden, we have a phone relationship manager who picks up all the inquiries on behalf of the owner and answers those inquiries on behalf of the owner, saving the owner time. So we have that. If you want more contacts than 9 contacts, you want to explore more properties, then we have paid plans. So the core real estate works on a free plus paid model. So many of the youngsters who want to save money and who have more time than funds, they are happy to use it for free. Once you basically get slightly busier in life, you want to save some money, you want you want to save some time and also money, then people prefer our paid plan. So revenue basically remains our very strong focus. We are not like other real estate companies and startups who only care about growth. I think once we started, within 6 months, we started monetization. So right now, our revenue is in, we don't tell the exact revenue, but of course, our revenue is in hundreds of crores per year. And we typically triple our revenue every year.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Asha, you can raise your hand. Next question is by Sakshi.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, I wish to say thank you to you because it's my third house through the no broker I got. Okay.
Oh, is it? Very happy to
Yeah,
hear that.
actually, every time when I want to change the house, I use the search on no broker only.
Okay.
I just want to know how about the competitions, like the competitions you are having, like 99 acres are there, Magic Bricks are there, like all those companies are coming in this business too. So how you manage to compete with them right now? Like, because I know when I search a house, then many of phones will start coming to me from the other different websites and from the different partners like that. So
Yeah.
how it's going?
So, Sakshi, thank you so much for your kind words and for being a customer.
And I should be thank you to you.
And in fact, the question could also be reversed, that how is it so that it took 5 years for other competitors to compete with us directly?
Actually, yeah, actually.
So the question is, what were they doing for the first 5 years? And so I think that time basically allowed us to grow further. I think so competition is going to be there, Sakshi, in anything you do. And if you are making some, if you are adding some value, of course, competition would be there. So now the competition has copied. So one of the questions which I saw on the chat was our revenue stream. So our revenue stream is core real estate, as I told you, and then home services, right, from packers, movers to painting and so on and so forth. So now many of the competitive players have started copying it, but and they're happy to, and it's perfectly okay to copy. The market is extremely large. We out of 100 owners in the country, I think barely 12 or 15 owners are coming online right now. Rest all of them are giving through brokers. So our real competition is actually not with the platforms. The real competition is with the brokers, individual brokers, and convincing individual owners that you should post a property on no broker and save money. And we are hoping that, for example, you as a person has saved some money, so perhaps you will advise your father that when he wants to rent his property or you want to sell your property, you will use no broker. So as this is happening in the past 6 years, the platform is becoming bigger and bigger. And today, almost 70% of the customers who come on no broker are old customers who have come before. So that is becoming bigger. The problem with which the competition will face and is facing is they're trying to do both. They are trying to make revenue from broker and they are trying to be no broker. You can't do that. So it is basically equivalent to saying that you want to be a full cost airline and you also want to be a low cost airline. You can't be Kingfisher and Indigo at the same time. You have to decide one. What do you want to do? And the bad experience which you have faced, that once you search a property on any other platform, the phone number is shared with broker for a fee, and then they start calling you. So I think that bad experience is basically at the fulcrum of the basic dilemma that they have, whether they want to do X or Y. So there's the situation.
I just need to ask one more thing. Like, do you I don't know. I always searched on the no broker as a rented. Like I need as a tenant. Okay. So what's about the owner? When the owners register over there in the no broker, is there any filter process that only owners are registered? Because sometimes through no broker also, I got to touch with some of the agents, the brokers. Okay. When I call them that it's your property, then I come to know, no, they are the brokers and they're working in no brokers.
Yeah. So
Okay.
in case
So that is also happening. So is there any filter process, like how to filter this kind of a things?
So if there is even a single case, Sakshi, you need to tell us. I think my
I
email
surely
address.
I have a list of those people.
No, you should surely tell us. So my email address is very simple: amit@nobroker.com. So please tell me. We are very, very strict. So we have a algorithm which is able to take care of 99% of any broker who tries to seek it. And then customers like you complain to us immediately the moment they see any broker. So we ban them completely. The objective is to basically ban brokers and only work with the genuine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sakshi.
Okay, so I think Sakshi kind of asked this question already, but Asha also just wanted to understand. I think you said you have this algorithm. So how do you differentiate between a broker and an owner?
Right.
So
I'm sure it must be proprietary, but like maybe some broader idea about it.
So Asha, if we tell our algorithm right now, then you will only see brokers on the platform. so the algorithm is of course proprietary. It takes care of at least 30, 40 parameters which go into the algorithm, and we keep on refining the algorithm every day because we want to be always one step ahead of the broker. And the algorithm is extremely strong. So the situation where a broker will come and use the platform is very limited. We use all the digital breadcrumbs which are available to catch them. And customers also basically help us weed them out faster.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so Vaibhav, you can go next.
So good afternoon, sir. Actually, I wanted to ask you, like when it comes to entrepreneurship, it is usually said that the earlier you start, the better it is. But in your case, you passed out of IMA and then you worked for almost 10 years in corporate with PwC, ANZ Bank, and then you went towards starting something of your own. So how did it help you, that corporate experience that you took for 10 years and then started it? And do you also second this thing that the earlier you start, the better it is, or we should take some corporate experience beforehand and then start something of our own?
So see, if you look at it not from just my experience, but if you look at it scientifically, or you look at the studies which have been done, or the entrepreneurs which are doing well, there is no compulsion either way. So there are lots of entrepreneurs who dropped out of their college or who just started after college and have built amazingly large companies. There are many entrepreneurs who started in their 30s, like me. There are many who started in 40s and 50s and have basically made very large enterprises. So there is no proof that any of this, any particular age group is more successful. What is happening nowadays in the startup world is that majority of the people who are starting are youngsters who are seeing a lot of startup success by others and who are starting after their IIT or IIM degrees in their 20s. Having corporate experience is surely a plus. It is not mandatory, of course, because if you have followed someone, if you followed a leader, once you're a good follower, it is easier to be a leader. How can you be a great leader unless you have been a great follower first? So many of the great leaders have been great followers. Second is that corporate experience also teaches you what goes on in the mind of a person as a employee. Which small things matter to you, whether a daily allowance matters to you, whether number of sick leaves matter to you, staying late or coming early, or small things which basically matter to people. You are able to associate much more with them. So a case can be made that couple of years of corporate experience is not harmful. But if you are very passionate about your idea while you are passing out, then of course it doesn't make sense to wait and start sooner.
Also, sir, adding to that question, like when do you think the risk is high? When we start early or when we start later on?
So I basically want to say one thing very frankly. All of you are going to have this IIM degree once you pass out. This IIM degree is basically going to, and it doesn't matter whether it's from Ahmedabad or Visakhapatnam, IIM degree is IIM degree. And this IIM degree will basically take care of you for your entire life. Jindagi bhar roti kha sakte hain IIM ki degree se. So that is the truth. If you leave a job and take some risk, you can always use your IIM degree and basically take a job back. It might be ₹1 lakh more or less. That doesn't matter in the long term. But you can always take a break, try something of your own, and come back in the job market at any point of time. As IIM alumni, we are very fortunate people in the country to be basically part of this elite group. So fundamentally, my question is that if you can't take risk, once you have such a good degree on your resume, then when will you take risk? What do you really need to take risk? You have a degree which will always take care of your job. So I think the only thing which basically matters is that the risk is the same. Risk is of the time, right? If you take a risk in the age of 28, you will lose a salary which is of that age group. If you take a leave from your job in 30s, then you will basically opportunity cost is much more in terms of salary, but that's because of your age group. So I don't think the risk is more or less. The risk is always of the time which is going in. But what I basically used for myself was as Bezos says, is the regret minimization framework. What the regret minimization framework basically says is that once you are in your 60s, retired, sitting in your armchair, would you look back at life and think that, I should have taken that risk. I should have done something at that point of time. Some of my other friends did it. I did not do it. So if it is going to come as a regret to you once you get old, you should surely do it. Then it's a very big risk of not doing. But if you enjoy working in a other startup or with the other corporate startup or other corporate setup and making that company bigger and bigger with the comfort of a known brand, with the comfort of good salary coming in, that's also a very good life. That's also a very good value addition, because many of the people in No Broker belong to that category who run it like their own mini company, and they enjoy that experience. So I think both are okay. From the risk perspective, what I basically love is the quote by Mark Zuckerberg that not taking any risk in life is the biggest risk in life. If you don't take any risk, be it personal finance, be it relationships, be it career, then there can never be a very high upside. So that depends upon you. in each of the things, you need to take some risk to get some upside.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, I just wanna parlay a comment by Yash. He basically said that as per a Wharton study, the average age of a successful entrepreneur is around 40 to 45. So I think it's absolutely all right to start up late. And going on to the next question, I'll take this one from the chat. So Ritvik wants to ask, how has the pandemic affected your business?
So I think more than pandemic has been still okay with us because Indians are generally very resilient, and the moment the lockdown gets over, people start moving houses, start shifting, and the business picks up again. I think for us, the difficult periods have always been the lockdown period. So in the lockdown period, people are not allowed to come out of their house. So the lockdown period of 1.5 months have been tough for our customers. But this is something which is basically a global event. Overall, the past 1 year, our team has done well. We have hired more people than we were before the pandemic. Our revenue has doubled in the past 1 year. So overall, in terms of revenue, in terms of business, we have done good. But yes, had pandemic not been there, we would have done even better. We would have perhaps tripled our revenue.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Just one second.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. So regarding the pandemic question, so I just read somewhere that post-pandemic people are more into buying their own properties. Plus, the market has been suppressed for a while in terms of the cost of purchasing a house. So has that actually led to some sort of an upside for your business lately, like home ownership becoming? Because people also want to be like they're trying to buy homes right now because the market has basically taken a dip. I'm talking about NCR though in general. And it's still one of the areas you don't have that much of a presence. So now what I want to ask is like, because the rates are usually lower, and I think no broker also wants to, help people buy and sell houses. So in this case, what I want to ask is, because people have sort of had some sort of an inclination towards buying property during and post pandemic. So has that led to some sort of extra revenue streams from, let's say, the buying and selling segment?
Yes. So, of course, it has helped us. So, what has happened is in real estate is that, in fact, what I thought before pandemic was, when pandemic hit, was that buy and sell market will crash further because it has already been in the doldrums for the past couple of years. But surprisingly and thankfully, pandemic has not caused the loss of many jobs. At the lower middle class and the lower class, of course, there has been havoc in their livelihoods. But at the middle class and the upper middle class, the job loss has been very minimal, thankfully. And coupled with, I think, good numbers in stock market, plus coupled with people having their savings for a long time, plus very low home loan rates, plus very low cost of the home prices, last 1 year has been very good in terms of buy and sell. So there has been a boom in buy and sell in the past one year across the country. And of course, this has benefited no problem.
Thank you, sir. Next question is by Aman. You can ask.
Yes, audible to you, sir?
Yes.
So it's about investing in real estate. So, like in the recent past 10 years, the industry has been stagnant in terms of real estate purchasing. The rental yields has been very low, around 1 to 2%, and even the inflation has been around 6 to 7%. So, what is your view regarding investing in this in terms of personal finance, like asset allocation and equity debt, and then coming to real estate? So, what would you say?
Thank you, Aman. Aman, this is a good question. So, what has basically happened is that overall the prices in real estate in general are very meaningful right now. So of course, real estate is not a global answer. Real estate is a local answer, right? The price of a flat in the same building may differ between two. One may be a good deal, another may not be a good deal. But if you ask a generic question, I would say the prices across the country are very, very meaningfully right and fair at this point of time. And right now, what we are seeing is that most of the people have realized it. People are, so if you want to buy for your own personal use or for your family use, it's a very good time to buy. Right now, the investors are not there in the market. People who used to basically buy it for 1 year, 2 years, and then before launch or pre-launch, they used to buy, and before occupancy, they will quickly sell it. Before registration, they will sell it. So all those flippers who used to basically make quick bucks, those guys are still not there, thankfully, but they will come in the next year or 2 years. So right now, the prices are very good in terms of buying for the end.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Then there's a question by Siddhant, and I think it's something which even I resonate with. How are you able to convince the owners, especially in the early stages, to come to your platform?
Yeah. So owners, between owners and tenants, it is much more difficult to get owners on the platform because of their age, and hence our TV ads, which we run, also focus on the homeowner. So that's how basically it goes. I think when you start a C2C platform where both the sides are customers, owners, and tenants, it is much more difficult to build it compared to a broker to customer platform, because brokers, you can make it free for them for first 1 year. They will populate your site with a lot of real plus fake listings, but the site will start working. So the customer to customer platform is much more difficult to build. And once you have built it, it is not easy to replicate also, which is the positive side of a customer to customer platform. Initial adopters are always there for every startup, thankfully, in India. And especially in Bangalore. So I think we started in Bangalore and Bombay, and magically so we found lots of people who came on the platform as a tenant, as a owner, and tested it. You can always ask that why is it that few people came, but I think there are, in every society, there are some people who are happy to try some new things. There are much more forgiving with the startups and their mistakes, and are happy to basically explore if they can make any savings. So I think just initial adopters, we will just make sure that we give them the best experience that we can. And then slowly the flywheel became bigger and bigger.
So it actually reminds me of one of our case studies wherein the solution, I wouldn't call it a solution, but the rightful answer was that sometimes it's serendipity that actually helps you out in the beginning. There isn't any concrete answer to it. Sir, the next question is by actually one of my seniors. He's also joined us today. It's by Vikrant. Vikrant, go ahead.
Hello, Amit. Actually, I'm pass out from IIM Visakhapatnam itself. I'm 2017-19 batch pass out. And we have started our startup just few months back, and 3 of my other co-founders are also in this chat. So I have multiple questions. So I would ask 3 questions. So I will start with first one. There are 3 important aspects for any startup. One is MVP or product. Second thing is traction, and third thing is scope. If you would have to rate on the in the early stages, if you would have to rate on the scale of 10, how would you rate that if you want to raise money from any investor?
You said MVP. Second, you said
MVP or product. Second thing is traction, and the third is scope of the start of the market.
Scope, by scope of the startup, you meant market size, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So surprisingly, the point number 3 is the filter. If you may have a great MVP, you may have a great traction, but if you don't have large scope possible, large market size possible, no one is going to fund you. So the third thing is the thing which is most overlooked by entrepreneurs. They are very, very consumed by the traction part and the product part. But you need to think that whether you are solving a problem, the problem that you are solving is a very micro problem from the India standpoint. It's a problem which has a large market size. Because investor needs to think about his return. So unless he is able to at least say that the bull case is very large, it's going to be very difficult. So hence, you should never be conservative in terms of your market size with the possible investor. So that is one thing. And of course, the MVP is naturally comes before than the traction. I think product investors are still okay because they know that the product will evolve. Traction also they are okay because they know the traction will come over time. I think what is basically seen more is that what problem are you solving is really that is that something which customers are going to like, and is that something which is going to add huge amount of value. So I think the real play is there. So investors basically, that's why investors use this US and China analogy, which didn't help us. But the reason why they use it is they try to see whether the scope can be really large and whether there's a problem which has been tested somewhere else and will work here. So over emphasizing on product and MVP is not good. MVP by definition says minimum viable product. So make minimum viable product, get some traction, and approach investors in case you have an institutional funding need. Because in your mind, you will try to think that 2,000 customers are much more than 1,500. Actually, they are not. So we have been to a stage that we thought that now we have 2,000 customers, let me get to 4,000, then only we'll go and talk to somebody. No one cares. Between 2K and 4K, there's no difference to them. Yeah.
So my next question is, as you said in your address itself, that you started raising money from outside India. So my question is, so first about raising money in the initial days or initial months. One thing is losing a lot of lot of shares easily, because everyone thinks about being a unicorn in next 2 years or 3 years. Now companies are being getting unicorn in next stage in next 2-3 years itself. One thing is losing shares, lot amount of shares in the initial days, and the second thing is getting good amount of money. How can one balance it? One thing is, if you get good money, the initial investors, mainly angel investors or VCs, would ask good amount of shares, good percentage of shares in the company. How to manage this?
I think what is often now a practice is that if you are raising a round from angel investors, then you can tell them that instead of telling about valuation, you are going to give it at a discount up to the next valuation. So instead of telling them that your company's valuation is 10 crore and hence they will get 10% for 1 crore investment, you basically say that this is at a discount to my next round at 30%, 40%. So in case you are able to get the next round for a 40 crore funding, then you basically lose less shares. So one is that trick. Second, as far as raising money is concerned, you should try to see mathematically raising higher money for a lesser number of shares is the best deal. But you also need some insurance money so that you don't run out of your money. So it's a basically tightrope. You need to see how much funds do you have for how long, and then decide.
Yeah. So my next question is related to that itself. So suppose in the case that we are not going to run so next 6 months or 1 year, but the scope of product is very good in the market. So how early one can start approaching these investors, these angel investors, VCs, and also how to find them. So that is also a very important thing during initial stages.
So I think you should start meeting with investors as early as possible. So
before MVP itself.
If you have a friend, if you have an IIM senior alumni working in a VC company, which I'm sure there is someone, you should talk to him even before MVP. There is no harm. And after MVP, surely you should start meeting investors, because then you start getting a feel of what they're looking for. Otherwise, meeting investors too late can be disastrous, because then you are heading somewhere else and they have some other problem in their mind. So one is this. So I think meeting investors early is a good idea. You may decide not to raise funds and not to basically part away with your precious equity early. Or you may say, I'm going to only give 5% dilution right now as insurance money, and then let me come back to you later. So that is always in your hands. That you can always do. But meeting investors early is generally a good idea.
So in case of, because in the initial stages itself, you can be rejected by the investors itself. So if I approach Sequoia in the initial days, maybe they will reject. So in that case, when can we approach these VCs again for investment rounds?
So I think generally what happens is that what people do is that every fortnight or every month, they keep on sending updates to the person whom they have met. And we have also basically sent a lot of cold call emails or through our Alumni Connect, because then Alumni Connect, any referral is basically gets the door opened faster. And the VCs also basically want to invest. It is not that yes, they have to say no much more time than yes, because of the flow of ideas, but they also want to see the traction. They also want the updates. So generally the practice is that once you meet somebody, you keep on sending some regular updates, which are neither too frequent, they shouldn't be too intrusive, and shouldn't be too long, but a pithy, concise summaries of your business every fortnight, every month.
And in case of angel investors versus accelerators, which is the best thing in the initial phases of the startup?
Sorry, I didn't
Angel
understand.
investors versus accelerators.
Angel investors versus
Accelerators. Startup accelerators.
startup accelerators. Yeah, startup accelerators are slightly better, but many of these startup accelerators just don't give much money and take share in return of mentorship and so on. So I think that you need to decide whether you need mentorship, then only you should give your equity to the startup accelerators. Otherwise, raise money from these investors.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikrant. All the best.
Thanks. I am on your link. I am in your contacts basically.
Sure, great.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so the next question is by Rohit. He wants to ask, how did you pilot test your idea? And what kind of
So I think,
research would you take
yeah.
into accommodation?
So I think many of these startup ideas come from personal experiences. So my experience and my co-founder's experience was that we found dealing with brokers very painful. We felt that they are charging us too much money for very little value addition, and hence we said that we want to basically do something in which we are able to remove them. So it came from our own experience. We spoke to lots of friends. We spoke to lots of stranger customers before launching this up. And then when we spoke to customers, we came up with very good suggestions. For example, we never thought that rental agreement is a big deal. But when we spoke to owners and tenants and we said that do you want a service like known brokerage? They said, yeah, but who will do rental agreement? And we're like, rental agreement mein kya hai? Wo to basically there's a draft and you basically take a printout and with a 20 rupees stamp paper, you sign on it and you just go to some government office, so some BBMP municipality office and you get it. So for us, it was such a simple deal, but for customers, it was a hassle, and a hassle which a broker basically solves. So from an analytical point of view, you will feel that if you are saving 20,000 rupees of brokerage, who cares about a couple of hundred rupees of rental agreement? But for customer, no. For customer, it was a combined service and they cared about it. So talking with customers and finding out what really matters to them is hugely rewarding, hugely enriching, and hugely humbling because many a times whatever goes in your mind is not how customers think. So this was it. And another question which basically I see on the chat, which Rohit has asked, is how did you? I think this is the question about which Rohit has asked, right? That we are tackling right now,
Yes.
which is how did you test your idea? So this is another suggestion which I want to basically give to everybody, including Vikrant, is that when you are testing your idea, when you are doing the MVP, do not take a large size. Don't take Pan India. Don't take all the cities. You don't even need to take Bombay. Just take Powai. Smaller market you take, the more efficient your marketing dollars are, the more easily you are able to get traction and see what customers are saying. People are often, you should worry about overall market size, theoretical market size. But you don't need to attain that market size or a percentage before reaching, before getting convinced. The smaller bite you take, the better you can chew it, the better you yourself will get convinced.
Okay, so I'll ask the next question. Rohit, are you fine with the answer? Is there anything else you'd like to ask?
Fine, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohit.
Okay, guys, you can actually directly ask your questions, like you don't have to mediate it through me. I'm pretty sure sir would love it that if you directly ask him your question, because I'm pretty sure you relate to that more than I do. Something may get lost in translation. So Sanchit, would you like to go next, or Shalini? Okay, Sanchit, yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. So sir, my question is No Broker your first idea, or you have some many ideas when you are in the corporate and working on those ideas, and finally No Broker is the one for which you felt that you should devote your full time to it? And
No Broker is my second idea. I had another idea which was to do with societies and advertisement space, which I tried almost 10, 12 years back. But at that point of time, I was working with PwC, and I realized that doing both the things, which is starting something of your own and doing a job, may be tricky at times. So either you should be very, very sure about. So I think that didn't work out because when I had some free time in PwC, I started something of my own or as a side project. And when the things got busier, then I left it. So I think now my learning is that I should have laid very clear-cut timelines and goals. But yeah, it's my second idea.
Second question is, sir, like you are from IIT and IIM, so you must have some decent fund to start up on your own. So when was the point that you felt that the external investment is required? What are the challenges, stages, and what challenges basically you faced?
Yeah, but the tricky portion is that even if you are from a good college and if you start working for a couple of years, you end up investing that money. You end up investing it in real estate, buying some property, buying some homes, and taking a home loan out of it. So there was not some obscene amount of savings available. But whatever money I had was enough for a year and a half. So what basically I thought is that I'm going to work for I'm going to leave job and bootstrap for 2 years. If things don't work out in 2 years, then I'm going to join the job back. But of course, because business also requires funds, so the fund depletion was a little faster. So then the timeline basically became 1.5 years. But what I would advise to everybody in this call is that if you want to start something of your own, make sure that you have funds for at least 12 to 18 months. You may earn it from your job, or you may borrow it from your friend or family. That's fine, no matter from where it comes. But you should have clear funds for next 12 to 18 months, which includes your living expenses, some expense that the business would need, your education, your EMI, which you might have, or any other outflow that you have. Unless you have 12 to 18 months, do not start something of your own, because then it puts financial pressure very quickly. And startup pressure plus financial pressure is too much to bear, and there are higher chances that you will quit after a few months, because the journey may not be very easy.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Shalini, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, sir. So my question is on the same lines, that how you convince owners to come on board. So you said that there are some early set of people and owner who usually want to try out these platforms. So the people who try out all such on all such platforms. There's like on your competitors as well. So how do you, and they provide kind of same benefits in all the websites. So how do you distinguish your services from your competitors, and how do you try to attract and retain customers?
So what you're asking is multiple questions. So let me try to answer it. So one is that our concept was completely different from others. On other websites, there were brokers. We said we are not going to find any broker on our site. So the concept was different. The look and feel of sites basically feel similar, but you don't save brokerage on other side, but you save brokerage on no broker. So the concept was different. And when you start something of your own, you are trying, as I said earlier, there are some initial adopters who come in who try your service. Now it depends upon you whether how good experience you are able to give it to them. So that's how basically things start, and slowly the flywheel starts becoming. So what I'm trying to basically say is that when you are starting something of your own, it's slightly different or completely different from whatever else is happening in the market, right? You have marketing tricks to basically get customers, and those tricks can be pretty inexpensive also. So digital marketing, Google, Facebook marketing is pretty cheap compared to a TV ad. Then there are ATL marketing, which is TV ad and so on, billboards, which we did not do first. We did the BTL marketing, which is below the line marketing. So we did no parking boards, we did auto rickshaw branding, we did things which were cheaper, newspaper pamphlets, which were cheaper to basically inform customers. And then when those customers came, we made sure that we could give the best experience that we can. And then slowly you wait with patience, you keep on doing the same thing again and again. Just repeat the same process the next day again, and then the next day again.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini.
Okay, any other questions, guys? If there are none, I also prepared a backup list of questions. But I won't go too in depth with these, but I'll just probably pick a couple of them. So one is I read some HBR article that basically said that money isn't seen for all. And for that, to elaborate on it, I just want to ask that how important is it for, let's say, a new entrepreneur or a new startup to find the right investor, somebody who has the right network and maybe he brings in industry knowledge or the technical know-how, what basically is needed to succeed in a particular business?
In startup, you can have two types of startups. One where where it doesn't need too much of funds. So those these are the startups where you can basically bootstrap, which is great. So if you have a startup in which you can bootstrap, it is amazing, because then you don't need to depend on any investor, and you can scale it up as much as you can, and you don't need to really dilute your share. So that is one. But in a business like us, which is a real estate business, it's highly competitive. It requires funds because the size is very large for the country. The opportunity is also very large. So we knew that we had to raise institutional funds. So our objective was to basically have the MVP, have the traction, and then approach investors, and then of course respect money. So what we did was, once we got money, then we respected it a lot. So even when we got 18 crores, we did not have corporate office. We took a home, and we started office from there. We did not buy any AC, even when it was hot. So despite having 18 crores in the bank, we said we are not going to buy AC. We somehow manage. So we respected money a lot. We did not say that money is easy to come, because we said we have given our shares in return to it. So that was our approach, being very frugal with money, spending it where the ROI is good, but otherwise being very careful.
Okay, sir. I do remember reading somewhere that like when it came to advertising, you would use autos basically as a means to communicate to a wider audience. Is it just me?
No, I think he's stuck.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, you're there. So I remember reading somewhere that you use autowalas as like for viral marketing in the initial phases, instead of going all out on bigger budgets.
Yes,
so,
you're right.
Yeah. Okay, so I have another question. In spite of multiple startup schemes that have been started by the Indian government, there's not enough traction for these schemes. And I used to work at a bank also prior to this, and we'd be rejecting a lot of applications that used to come our way. So how can the government use the banking system, more official and formal channels, to maybe lend out to startups?
यार मुझे नहीं पता ये सब. मतलब I am saying government giving funds to startup, I don't think that is possible. I think what we want from government is not to create any obstacle. So that's it. We just want government to stay away from us and let us do our job. I think that's all that we want from government.
Okay. Another thing, I was checking out one of the websites. I noticed that there was a Series D funding. Could you explain a bit more about that? And when does it Series D funding? Could you shed some light on that? Like, when does that come into play? Because usually it's ABC for
So we raised Series A funding then, which was 5-6 years back from partners. Then there was Series B funding. So if you read our history, we have raised all A, B, C, D. So what typically happens is that any institutional funding which is typically more than 10-15 crores is typically called a Series A funding. Nowadays, the Series A fundings have become bigger in terms of 20 crore, 30 crore, 35 crores. And then the Series B funding is the second round which happens, which are typically little bigger than the Series A. Then comes Series C, then comes Series B. So Series A, B, C, D are nothing but just rounds of funding which happen.
Okay, because I do remember reading that Series D is more for special purpose acquisitions, and I did notice that you did purchase a small startup from Gurgaon in 2020. So was that probably used to offset some of that, or some other reason?
No,
I think Society Connect was the name, right?
Yeah. So you are right, but it is not that Series D or E or F funding is to basically buy some other company. But yes, it is possible that once companies are at that stage, they do end up buying other companies. So we did buy a company called Society Connect, because apart from the core no broker, we have another thing which is called no broker hood. I'm not sure whether anybody in this call knows about no broker hood, or whether any of you guys have it in your homes or your your friend's home. So in case you have, please ping it on the chat. So for No Broker, Hood is a large segment of No Broker that we are building, which basically means apartment apps, just like Apartment Adda Apna Complex, which are given to the security guards, and for any entry and exit, they take permission through you on the app. So it enhances the security of the apartment society, and it also basically has a financial management module for doing the taxes and property tax and calculation and maintenance bill of the society. That particular skill we did not have, so we bought a company called Society Connect in NCR, which had that skill and that technical skill, and now we are able to do both.
Okay, sir. I'll just probably ask one more question and let's wrap this up. Okay, so my next question is that, okay, so I've noticed that for a lot of startups, right, equity is more popular than debt. And it so happens that usually in the initial stages that you get funded by, like people taking an equity stake in your company. So do you think that creates some sort of unnecessary, no, I wouldn't say unnecessary, but a lot of like pressure on, let's say, the entrepreneur to basically deliver? Because sometimes you may just promise that you'll be able to deliver a particular set of returns or metrics, whereas you just need the funding and you probably just agree to it at that point of time.
So see, the reason why startup guys prefer equity, at least in the early stage compared to debt, is because in debt, then their personal net worth also comes into question. Tomorrow, if you're not able to pay, then whatever your home is, that is at a risk. So startup guys are anyway taking the risk of the salary and their career, so they don't want to take undue risk. So hence, debt is not preferred in the early stage. Of course, if you're raising money from investors, then investors would want your company to do well. So apart from some couple of weird investors, I don't think there are investors who pressurize you too much. If you're raising money from any decently good investors, they would not pressurize, because all the investors who have been in this business for long know that when they're investing, so now we also invest small couple of lakhs here and there in other companies. And then we basically, and when we are also investing, we know that there is a good 70-80% chance the company will shut down. But from the remaining 10-20% of the company, something big will happen, which will take care of our return. Same thing even investors know. So I don't think they pressurize founders too much. Some might have weird personality and hence they may do that. But if you are saying that by raising money, are you putting under pressure for higher metrics? Yes, you are. But that's what we anyway want. Why are we starting something of our own if we don't want to make it big? Why would we sacrifice our career for building something which is small? So we also, so for example, in our case, thankfully, our investors are not weird. They are very helpful and they've never put any pressure on us, because they know that Amit, Akhil, Saurabh will be burning midnight oil anyway to do the best that they can. So I think as a startup guy, you will be doing the best which is there. Your mind will be engrossed in terms of pushing numbers, pleasing customers. And hence, yeah, of course, managing shareholders takes some time, takes some tact, and we are learning that. But apart from some weird cases, I think generally investors are supportive. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think Vikrant has one more question, so I'll let him go once.
Yeah. So Vishnu asked a question about the series funding. So I have a question. Like, when do you decide what? And first thing is, what is the difference between this pre-Series A funding, then Series A funding? When do you plan to do that? And then, yeah. So actually, and amount, if you are raising a certain limit, so that because you are raising a valuation of your company. In that case, will the valuation remain same for pre-Series A, Series A and Series A, or similarly to pre-seed or seed?
No, I think these are just terms which we entrepreneurs or investors have come up with. Sometimes, so there is no definition of pre-Series A or seed funding or Series A. There's no definition. Once you have raised funds, then typically what people do is they call the next one as Series B, the next one as Series C. So it is basically depends on you. Sometimes some entrepreneurs, when they raise funds, they have a mental limit in their mind. They think that X crore is so as a entrepreneur, you might think that if you raise below 10 crore, then this is pre-Series A. But you can very well raise 5 crores and call it Series A, and everybody will say, okay, Series A. So I think it's something which founders are doing to themselves, and they have their own goals. So a founder may think that unless I raise 30 crores, it is not Series A. So whatever I am raising, this is a pre-step, and hence I'm going to call it pre-Series A. So it's all which founders are doing. You can raise 5 crores tomorrow, if you and then call it Series A. Everybody is fine. So it's a term which we founders have defined. Media or investors don't care about it.
And how these investors come with some more investors? So because in the series funding, so multiple investors join to make it a series funding. In that case, so if I approach one of the investors, they will come up with some more investors if they are interested, or should I approach multiple investors into the same round and go for a series funding?
So you have to approach investors on your own. Yes, sometimes investors do connect with other investors, but don't bank on it. Investors want you to reach to other investors. They want other investors to be interested in your startup. It's a validation for them. So if your investor is good, then he will connect you with others. But you need to be a little bit lucky to get such good investors. Otherwise, many of the investors that you should anyway try. So if you have an investor on your cap table, you should surely ask him for more references. That's your duty. But they will also expect you to approach more investors in parallel.
Thank you very much.
Great, guys.
So I think that covers it all. Although I just have one point which I thought, by providing all these value-added services, is a broker becoming some sort of a quasi-broker in the process?
No, because these services are the ones in which broker, typically in real estate, is the one who takes a month of rent. We take a flat fee, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 rupees to cover our expenses. That's all. We don't care whether you are looking for a 20,000 rupee house or a 2 lakh rupee house. We don't care about it. So we don't take a percentage. Hence, our logo is also the opposite of percentage. And we have a freemium model in which we allow a large percentage of customers to do it for free. A broker doesn't allow it for free. So we need to make some revenue, right? Because one of the early question was, what's your revenue model? So if you don't make revenue, then how do we succeed? So we have to make some revenue. But the distinction between us and a broker is that broker will never give it for free, and broker will link it to the price of the property. We don't care. We just care about a flat fee so that we can take care of our expenses.
Okay, sir. So I'll hand it over to Saurabh to conclude the session. And thank you so much for taking my doubts. I think some of them were very basic ones, though.
Thank you. And I hope Sakshi next time takes a paid plan.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll definitely get to you if I find someone like that.
Sure.
Thank you so much, sir. There are a lot of insights into it, but due to time crunch, I will just limit it to few. To begin with, on behalf of entire IIM Visakhapatnam fraternity, I would like to extend my gratitude to Mr. Amit Kumar Agrawal for joining and sharing with us your findings and opinions on the topic raising capital. The overall discussion was very enriching and insightful. To quickly summarize the discussion, sir shared his journey on how he ended up founding the nobroker.com. As the discussion went on, he talked about the revenue model of nobroker.com, which is free plus paid model across different segments, and also discussed about companies' competition. Talking about the recent times, he stated that there has been a minimal effect on the operations due to pandemic. There has been more dramatic changes in the operation of real estate business. On the positive note, the discussion also focused on the three main elements of startup and how to rate them in order to gain funding. He also addressed concerns regarding raising and funding, managing the investors, and different topics like this. Lastly, I want to thank the amazing audience whose curiosity about the topic made the session lively. Thank you so much, sir. I will end the topic here only.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
So lastly, I would request you to just stay up for a minute. I will take a screenshot so that we have a photo with us.
Sure.
Guys, I would request you to switch on the video.